It's been an extremely rough go for the San Francisco Giants offense for well over a month, including today. They only got one run, but guess what? They allowed zero and they won this game. They took 3 out of 4 from the D-backs. They won the Red Sox series. They swept the A's series. The Giants had a great homestand. Despite the bats continuing to be ice cold, they're doing it right now with pitching and defense.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. Check us out there. Please hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you're listening today. This episode of Locked On Giants is brought to you by eBay Motors. A championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. It's the same with your vehicle. So for the parts that fit, head to eBay Motors and look for the green check. Stay in the game with eBay Guaranteed Fit, ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. And coming up on today's show, the pitching, the defense, the offense, and it's been a weird combination. I'm not going to lie. And today, you can look at this game and I've said this a million times, but if the D-backs scored 2 runs, this episode and the main topic here would be all about the offense failing to get the job done. But because the pitching and defense did what it did and held the D-backs to 0 runs, which they needed to do, this beginning is going to be about the Giants coming away with another win, and how, surprisingly to me, to be honest, if you've been listening to the show for years, I'm constantly saying the Giants are usually underrated offensively, and a lot of it has to do with their ballpark. You know, a team like the Rockies gets overrated offensively, and that's not really the case right now. The Giants are not underrated offensively. The Giants' overall offense has dipped to pretty somewhat significantly below Major League average, even, park adjusted. But the pitching, honestly, the defense was such a problem last year, and so run prevention was a problem too. And, the fact that they only have Logan, Webb, and Alex Cobb making regular turns in the rotation, you wouldn't think, okay, yeah, run prevention is the strength of the San Francisco Giants, but it has been. We have discussed in recent days how the Giants pitching, if you go all the way back to May 1st, the Giants pitching is second in the major leagues in earned run average. And May 1st was the first day after the Mexico City series, in which there were a ton of runs scored and a ton of home runs allowed. Altitude was much higher than Denver there. And so, we should kind of take that out regardless because it's not a normal environment. But the Giants have a 3.58 earned run average since May 1st, and that is second in all of Major League Baseball. The Padres have been better, but the next closest National League team is at 3.86, about 0.3 runs per 9 innings higher. And so, yeah, and today it was more of the same. And the day before that, Logan Webb did his thing and went 7 innings, allowed 2 runs in the first, and then that was it. Tyler Rogers with a clean 8th, Camilo Doval with a clean 9th. Man, they've leaned on Doval a lot recently, but that's less about reliance on bullpen games and more about the offense not gaining enough separation so that you don't have to use your closer. And then today, this was like a pure bullpen game. It wasn't an opener in front of it actually kind of was, with Tristan Beck going, as Kapler's now saying. I know some people are going to be annoyed by this, but he's calling it featured guys instead of bulk innings guys. And I kind of am with him in that bulk innings guy just doesn't have a nice ring to it. And I don't know, featured has the ring of you're trying too hard to come up with a word, but honestly, we got to try because bulk guy just doesn't sound right to me. But anyway, Beck was the featured pitcher in this game. He went 4 innings, 2 hits allowed, 3 strikeouts, 0 walks, 0 runs. 4 innings for Tristan Beck. And it lowered his season earned run average to 2.73. And so I know a lot of you are clamoring for Tristan Beck to move into the starting rotation. And I totally understand that. The one thing, and this is like, it speaks to more of a general philosophical thing, is that there just isn't much of a difference between. I'm not saying it doesn't matter to the players. I think it does. I think players want to start. We've seen Alex Wood be super vocal about that. I'm not sure a rookie like Tristan Beck is going to come out and say something like that, but I'm sure he would like to start. All these guys who are going multiple innings out of the quote-unquote bullpen, I'm sure they would like to start. But Scott Alexander pitched the first. Tristan Beck pitched the second, third, fourth, and fifth. What is the big difference between Beck pitching the first, second, third, and fourth and Alexander pitching the fifth? It's the same combination of 5 innings pitched, 4 by Beck, 1 by Alexander. It's not that big of a deal if it's reversed or not to me. It like objectively speaking, I get it. Like aesthetically speaking, like the starting pitcher, it has something to it. I understand 100%. But at the same time, those 5 innings are the same 5 innings in terms of who covered them. And so there's all these questions about like sustainability of the bullpen games or whatever. But if you look at who's in the bullpen, it's like guys who could easily be starters, and they kind of are taking up a starter's load out of the bullpen. So it's just kind of like, come on, it doesn't really objectively, I get that there's emotion involved and that there's more to it than just this, but can we just at least admit, we just have to start by admitting that objectively it's no different in terms of who covered the innings. In fact, strategically it is different because you let Alexander, it makes the opponent, if you use an opener like that, it makes the opponent set their lineup not knowing who you're going to go to, and then maybe they expect a righty like Beck to come in, and so they load up their lineup with lefties, and then you're able to start a lefty like Scott Alexander, and he gets to face some tough lefties at the top of the lineup where they don't have the advantage. And so all of it has worked. That's the thing, and I don't at all agree that it's like some kind of unsustainable thing. I don't agree at all, like in terms of wear and tear. I don't think they're overworking these guys except Duvall, but I think that recently Duvall, but that has more to do with the run scoring. They've just been in these tight games where they've had the lead, and they, in a 1-0 game today, you don't want to go to Jacob Junis in the ninth. You want to go to Camilo Duvall, and they have an off day tomorrow. But I also don't agree, this won't work in the postseason. I'm just reminded, the Mets, right? They had Jacob deGrom and Max Scherzer in their little postseason wildcard round series last year, and they get picked to win that series easily because of the pitchers they have going. And Max Scherzer, I think he allowed 4 homers in the start. And so I think it's confirmation bias. If you see a bullpen game in the postseason and the team loses, you're like, it's because of the bullpen game. Whereas you see a Max Scherzer get lit up, you don't say it's because they used a traditional starter. It's just baseball. Sometimes you score runs against pitchers. And these guys are just pitchers, and that's the thing, is the identities and the roles are being kind of blurred by the San Francisco Giants, and it's worked. It's worked. The run prevention has been there. The defense has been there. Coming up in just a minute, we are going to discuss the San Francisco Giants defense, which, like I said last year, was such a problem, and this year it has not been, as we kind of predicted on the show, if I do say so myself. So we will get into that in just a minute. And before we do, today's episode is brought to you in part by Sleeper. Do you want the chance to win more money with less picks? Head to Sleeper, where you can win up to 100 times your money on just 2 or more fantasy baseball picks. Sleeper is now offering up to a 100 times payout for up to 8 pick contests. Choose as many as 8 players that you like and pick simply more or less on your favorite baseball stats. like homers, strikeouts, hits, and more. Get your picks right and you could win big. Think Wilmer Flores is going to stay red hot and hit another homer against the Oakland A's coming up? Pick more. Smash the more on homers. Do you think Ellie De La Cruz, the exciting young 21-year-old on the Cincinnati Reds, is going to try to steal? Head over to the Reds game and smash more on steals. Entries can be made in 30 seconds or less. It's that easy. They also have safe and fast withdrawals. Use promo code LOCKEDON and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 30 states. Check out Sleeper today. All right, as promised, defense. It's not just been pitching. It's just been run prevention for the Giants recently. It certainly hasn't been the offense. The offense has been in just one of the worst slumps that they've been in the last 5 years, to be honest. Like, ever since basically this new coaching staff came in 2020, they were hot offensively for that 60-game season. They had a good year offensively. And then in 2021, obviously, 107 wins. They were like really good offensively all year. Posey, Crawford were great. 2022, despite the struggles, it was really about run prevention. The Giants were at least kind of solid offensively, but right now this is the worst they've been since 2019. But anyway, thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day, everydayers. Tomorrow on the show, a mailbag edition of the show. So look out on Twitter for the prompt post trade deadline questions. We're going to be talking about young players, Kyle Harrison getting close to the majors, and so much more. So be sure to check that out and throw your question into my Twitter mentions, please. Anyway, the defense, I just have to say that the San Francisco Giants defense, a lot of people thought was going to be a problem this year. And what I will say is that last year, I didn't think it was going to be a problem. I'm not trying to just do victory laps 24/7. Last year, I did not see that coming. What ended up transpiring when, according to outs above average, Statcast outs above average, minus 33 for the Giants last year, which was third worst in baseball, but really close to being tied for second worst in baseball. And I think by defensive runs saved, they were worst. So these metrics don't always agree, but I think the Statcast one is the most objective metric because it's using the, Hawkeye Statcast kind of system to make evaluations. And so anyway, Giants were clearly bad defensively, like really, really bad. I would argue it's what cost them going to the playoffs. Like if they had performed the way they've performed this year, I think that with Carlos Rodon and Logan, Webb and Doval and all those guys, the bullpen was also a problem with, the defense contributed so much because the starters had to come out early because of the bad defense, and it did kind of overwork the pen, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, this year, according to the same metric, outs above average, Giants are fifth best at plus 17 outs above average. Fifth best from third worst to fifth best. And it's a lot of the same guys in a way. I mean, Wade is like an everyday first baseman now, whereas he was an outfielder last year. I guess Patrick Bailey, I do not believe outs above average actually factors in catchers. In fact, I'm almost positive that it's not. Outs above average is not counting catchers. We have our other metrics for catchers, and Bailey's been great. So if you factor in how good they've been at their non-catchers plus what they've gotten from Bailey, Giants are one of the top defensive teams in the league. And it kind of drives me slightly nuts, all due respect to legendary Kruk and Kite, but Kruko's constantly talking about how the Giants defense ranks near the bottom, but he's looking at fielding percentage, which is not a good way to evaluate defense. And so, no, clearly, right? And he knows this. If I were to talk to him, I would say, look at how was the defense last year? Clearly bad. How has the defense been this year? I would say very much not clearly bad. In fact, clearly pretty darn good. And so the individual players, I think it's worth kind of looking at. I know J.D. Davis has been a big part of it, and he was a guy who last year. He wasn't on the Giants all year, but he was not a great defender. This year, +6 outs above average for JD Davis. That checks out to me. I mean, he's been rock solid over there. And Thairo Estrada, +9, even though he's missed the last month. But he's going to come back probably in their next game on Saturday, which is great news. Brandon Crawford, +5. Brett Wisely, he wasn't hitting a lick, but man, +4 outs above average. Mike Yastrzemski, +3. Casey Schmidt, this is going to be surprising to some people, and it's surprising to me. Checks in at the bottom here at -4. I think if we were to look closer, which I don't feel is necessary right now, I think this is kind of one of those things where you just say, small sample, these metrics aren't always super reliable. Like if you just make a couple bad plays, it might skew it. And also, I think it doesn't like him at shortstop. Whereas I think if we were to look at individual positions, it's going to grade out well at third and at second, probably. Michael Conforto, -3. Luis Matos, another like maybe somewhat unpopular or unexpected, -2 outs above average in center. Look, I'm not here to, we can another time nitpick every individual player, but the point is the Giants' defense and pitching has just carried them for the last, certainly like since late June when they started to not hit. And not hit has been they have done that very well, not hit. Like to great extent have they done that, including today. 1 run, 2 hits, a homer and a single. That was it, and that's all that it took. It's a miracle that they won that game. In fact, Grant Brisbee on Twitter points out that according to Baseball Reference and StatHead, this game today was the 13th time in the last 100 seasons that the Giants won a game with 3 base runners or fewer. The last time was when Joe Panic, the second Joe Panic Kenley Jansen homer game from 2018, meaning the second game of the year, right? Didn't they win back-to-back 1-0 games to start that season? And was that not 2017, 17 or 18, when they didn't have a good year overall? But that's crazy. I mean, 13 times in 100 seasons. So it is like a minor miracle that they won this game, given how bad the offense was. So I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Like coming into today, they offensively, according to weighted runs created plus, have been 4% below average. And that's as bad as it was today, probably going to drop down to like 5% below average. So entering today, that was 20th in Major League Baseball. So only 10 teams below them. So just like a bottom third offense have the Giants been. And it's really happened in the last month plus. It like they were about 5% above average at the end of June overall. And basically for a month, they've been so bad. And I know they've had some stretches in the Red Sox series and then a couple games in this Arizona series where they were setting the table a little bit and they just weren't able to like get a sac fly even a few times. Like the game on Wednesday, they should have had like 6 or 7 runs. They got 4 and it was enough. But it's just crazy how much they've struggled offensively for an extended period. Like I said, this is, I don't know how to like search for month-long periods and say this is the worst 30-day stretch that they've had since 2018 or 19. But I would imagine that it is. That's how bad it's been. So hopefully it ends. You know, hopefully it's just a slump. But it's to the point where, you know, it's been bad enough that it's changed my perception overall of their talent level offensively. That's how severe it's been. But like going into July, they were like 5% above average, and I would never kind of complain about that overall. But you know, they've managed to make it work. They have the 3rd best record in the National League. They're like 3 games up they're 2.5 games up on the top wild card spot over, I don't know what I'm saying. I'm kind of jumbled. They have a significant lead on a playoff spot. As of right now, they're 2 games behind the Dodgers. So they've made it work. They really need to turn it around offensively. I think getting guys back will be key. in doing that. So coming up in just a minute, we're going to turn the page to a different topic and get into a little bit this article that I dug up from the offseason, ranking the winners and losers. You're not going to want to miss who was called the biggest winners of the offseason and who were the biggest losers. Hint, the third best team in the National League, the Giants, one of the biggest losers of the offseason. Well, how's that working out? We'll get into it in just a minute. And before we do, all right, as promised, we're going to get into this winners and losers thing. I just thought it was fun because, trade deadline happened and I read some stuff that kind of ticked me off about. I've talked extensively about the Giants deadline. I've done 2 episodes where I addressed it pretty thoroughly and what my opinions are on the quiet deadline that they had. To sum it up in like 1 or 2 sentences, it ended up being a dud of a deadline for the league. There were a few players who might have fit the Giants well, notably Verlander, Scherzer, Jordan Montgomery. Verlander and Scherzer cost too much from a prospect perspective, given their age and signs of decline that they've shown. Montgomery would have made the most sense, but like I said, their pitching has gotten the job done, even though it's been non-traditional. So, Shohei Ohtani wasn't moved. Anyway, the winners and losers stuff. We are going to look back on what was said about the offseason. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers, tomorrow, a mailbag edition of the show. So look out on Twitter for the prompt this evening and feel free to ask a question. So, yeah, I read some kind of winners and losers stuff for the trade deadline and people mentioning the Giants as It wasn't actually that. I don't even click on the winners and losers of the trade deadline. It was something else that just someone was out of touch, it seemed, with their analysis of the Giants trade deadline, relying on experts, quote unquote, who I'm not even going to get into it. But there's all kinds of pieces. Who won the trade deadline? Who lost the trade deadline? And it's just simply impossible to know at this juncture. Like, Marco Scudero, the impact he had on the 2012 Giants. They don't win the World Series without him. And did anybody say they won that trade deadline? No. And so I get it. It's content. I'm in the business of content creation, so I absolutely understand the impulse to create content. And that's just like an easy, low-hanging fruit kind of article to write, is winners and losers. And it gets a lot of clicks, I'm sure. But I said this on Twitter, petition to end the kind of stupidity of the winners and losers article every offseason and every trade deadline, because we simply don't know. Want proof that we don't know? And this is no disrespect to the person who wrote this article. I actually think he's a good analyst at ESPN. But written in January, the winners and losers of the offseason, the big winners, ready for it? The New York Mets and the San Diego Padres, who have been arguably, maybe you throw the Cardinals in there too, but the 2 biggest disappointments of the Major League Baseball season thus far. I'm not saying the Padres can't go on a run. In fact, I'm low-key kind of terrified of the Padres lurking with their plus 75 run differential. But the Mets gave up. The Mets sold. They're done. They quit. They called uncle on the season. And here they are being named one of the biggest winners. And in fact, these huge contracts that they handed out, they had to pay down so much of them in order to buy prospect talent in return, which they did a good job of, but it was very expensive. And a very expensive way to buy some talent. But, it was actually pretty savvy that they did it. But anyway, were they the offseason's biggest winner? Heck no, they weren't. And were the Padres? It turns out, at least as of this moment, I can't even say today that these teams are, in fact, not the biggest winners. The Padres may win 20 games in a row, which does happen in baseball, and they very well could do it, and vault themselves to the top of the division for all I know. But, it just goes to show through 110-ish games, these teams have not been the biggest winners. And the biggest losers, number 1, the San Francisco Giants. And I'm just going to read through it a little bit. This one is easy as they came in second on Judge and Kodai Senga. I'm not sure that he's kind of a reliable source. So coming. I know that the Giants pursued Kodai Senga. That would have been a good ad for them, to be honest. Came in second on Judge and Kodai Senga, then let the Carlos Correa deal get away due to hesitation over the medical. Trying to shop at the top of the market and not walking away with one of those talents isn't bad on its own. There's normally better value down market, so it could even be good, but it's not what's going on here. San Francisco has a solid track record of getting mid-tier free agents like Rodon, Gausman, etc. So dipping into a market where it has a solid track record is smart, but that doesn't directly address the problem here. The talent base is severely lacking. So I guess this is probably before they made some of the other signings that they made, but he doesn't mention Carlos Rodon. But Carlos Rodon has been injured and ineffective. He's come back recently, and he's been terrible. Carlos Correa has been terrible offensively. He's been worse. He's not been very good. Let's just put it that way. And to be fair, the Giants' offseason of, they're Michael Conforto, Mitch Haniger, Ross Stripling, Sean Manaea, none of those guys is something to be like super proud of the addition that you made in the offseason. I'm not saying I don't believe in them, but thus far they have not lived up to expectations. I think Manaea is showing real signs of some real positive underlying stuff going on. Best fielding independent pitching in the major league since that outing in Minnesota in May. And Stripling's been good since coming off the IL. Conforto's been a disappointment, frankly. And Haniger too, but for Haniger it's like a small sample thing. But for Conforto it's been a bigger sample and it's just been lackluster. But so they definitely did have a disappointing offseason, but it's funny to say that the biggest winners are these teams that are, one gave up on their season, both are under 500. The biggest losers, the team with the third best record in the National League through 110 games, and the Red Sox, who also are kind of having a solid season, and the Los Angeles Dodgers, another one of the biggest losers. They've got the second best record in the National League. I wish they were the biggest losers, but yeah, it just does. The three teams that were the biggest losers are like above 500, and two of the three are in really good playoff positions. So let's end this madness and stop declaring winners and losers before games are played. But it won't happen. But I just wanted to rant about it a little bit. Anyway, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers, tomorrow on the show, a mailbag edition of the show. Look out on Twitter for the prompt, and then the Giants will go to Oakland. A little road trip to Oakland. Get to stay at home, and that's going to be coming up this weekend. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter or X at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. Helps me out a lot, so thanks in advance, and thanks to everyone who's done so already. Can't wait to be with you again tomorrow. Thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.